Hello, dear subscribers. Time is rushing by and it's not waiting for anyone. Today we shall be talking about not looking back when we see our redemption drawing nigh. And recently there was this Israeli missile strike, allegedly from the Golan Heights. And we read that Iran has responded accordingly by hitting Israeli targets. In Mark chapter 13, verse 14, after Jesus is speaking of the abomination of desolation, which we know now has been set up, you know what I'm talking about. Abomination, genetic modification of God's creation, man being the pinnacle of God's creation, and such genetically modified individuals becoming desolate. Therefore, this is describing the abomination of desolation, the last fulfillment of such desolation in the last days. I believe that the next 3 to 4 verses in Mark chapter 13, and we shall be reading through them, are pertaining to the rapture, and we are told not to look back. Hence, the parallel of Lot's wife in Sodom. So let's go to the relevant scripture. We're going to Mark, obviously, we're going to chapter 13, and we shall be comparing Mark 13 with Luke 21 and Matthew 24. And we also have some verses from Genesis and Daniel today. So this is the first synoptic gospel. And Mark 13 gives us an added detail which neither Matthew 24 and nor Luke 21 tells us. And it reads, "But when ye shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let him that readeth understand. Then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains, and let him that is on the housetop not go down into the house, neither enter therein to take anything out of his house. And let him that is in the field not turn back again for to take up his garment. But woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. And pray ye that your flight be not in winter, for in those days shall be affliction such as was not from the beginning of the creation which God created unto this time, neither shall be. And except that the Lord had shortened those days, no flesh should be saved, but for the elect's sake, whom he hath chosen, he hath shortened the days." So we have a parallel here to Lot's wife, who, as they were moving out of Sodom, she looked back, and as we all know, she was turned into a pillar of salt. Now, effectively, here, I feel it in my spirit that Jesus is telling us in verses 14, at the end of verse 14, in verse 15, and in verse 16, that we are not to look back. So here he's telling us 3 times. Then in verse 14, the last part of it, we read, "Then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains. So if you're going to flee to the mountains, you're not going to look back to Judea. You're going to look to the mountains. You're not going to look upon your material possessions. You're not going to look at your house. You're not going to get your garments, as we're going to read. You're not going to look at your family. You're not going to look back at your children, your unsaved children. Verse 15, and let him that is on the housetop not go down into the house, neither enter therein, to take anything out of his house. This is clear. You are not to turn back to go and get your wallet or your cell phone or your bug out bag. Material possessions, okay? You're not to think of any of that at that time. You're just to look up as your redemption draweth nigh. And let him that is in the field not turn back again, for to take up his garment. Okay? It's clothing and provisions. You're not to think about those. All right? And in verse 17 it says, woe to them that are with child and to them that give suck in those days. Because when the rapture of the worthy takes place, the children, the infants, and the unborn are going to be taken up in the rapture. So there is going to be much tribulation at the loss of these infants, fetuses, and young children below the accountable age. I am not of the opinion of any pre-trib or mid-trib or post-trib. But I do understand that the Bible tells us that we are not appointed to God's wrath. And as a watchman or a watchwoman, I am to keep my eyes open for the season that is at hand, when the harvest is due to be harvested. Now, Mark 13 and Matthew 24 speak about the abomination of desolation, whereas Luke 21 does not. But it mentions that, as we read in Luke 21, verse 20, Jerusalem will be compassed by armies, and the desolation thereof is nigh. So let us first go. So here in Mark chapter 13, it's the only gospel that tells us about when you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Up till there, that's mentioned in Matthew 24, but not in Luke 21. And Mark 13 additionally goes on to tell us, to qualify it, by telling us, standing where it ought not. Now we know that abomination of desolation is that thing, okay, the mark of the BEAST that has been placed where it ought not be placed, rendering that individual a genetically modified organism individual, and therefore that individual has been rendered a desolation. So we're going to Matthew 24, and we're going to take it from verse 15. No, hang on. Right. And it reads, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day, For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. So we see that there is a very good parallel to Mark 13, and we are told, whereas Mark 13 tells us, when we see the abomination standing where it ought not to be, Matthew chapter 24 qualifies this by saying, the abomination, when we see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place. So, therefore, we can infer that since the abomination of desolation is standing in the holy place, it is standing where it ought not to be. And the holy place, we know, is our body, because our bodies are the temple of God. And where the Holy Spirit resides in us, that is the holy place. Now let us make our way to Luke 21, and we shall be reading from chapter 20. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So let us now go. So as I already said, Mark 13 tells us that the desolation, the abomination of desolation is standing where it ought not. And in Matthew chapter 24, it's standing in the holy place. When we see this, and this is happening right now, we are not to look back, but we are to flee. Spiritually, we are to flee, even though we are not fleeing physically, but spiritually, we are to withdraw and not to associate with the practices that are common to our day. So let us see us taking you to Genesis chapter 19, and we read from verse 17, and it reads, and it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, this is the angel speaking to Lot, one of the two angels, that he said, escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said unto them, Oh, not so, my lord. Behold now, thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me, and I die. Behold now, the city is near to flee unto, and it is a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said unto him, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow the city for the which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou be come thither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities. and that which grew upon the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. So, if you read through Genesis, particularly through chapters Genesis 18 and chapter 19, you will understand that Lot's wife was a mother, and Lot's wife left sons behind her in Sodom because they refused to heed the warning of the angel to exit out of Sodom. So they were behind, and she was still attached to them, and she looked behind physically with her physical eyes. We are told that we now, in these last days, that we are not to look spiritually with our eyes back. We are not to have any material attachments, and when the time comes, we are not to look back, not even at our acquaintances. This is very hard. This is a very hard word, I understand, because as a mother of children, some of whom are unsaved, this is very, very hard indeed. So we are now in the days where the abomination of desolation has been set up. And that the setting up of the abomination of desolation, as you recall, has taken place in mid-December 2020. Or we may say we can round it off to January 1st, 2021, when the abomination that make it desolate was given emergency authorization to be rolled out globally. And the voluntary phase of taking the mark of the BEAST began. Also, the EU is preparing legislation for mandatory injections, and HR 550, the IMU and NIZation Infrastructure Modernization Act of 2021 will come into place along with the WHO Pandemic Treaty being signed, which I personally view as a covenant with many, as in Daniel 9:27. And we shall make our way there because this is a pertinent. I believe this is the covenant with many, because this is a covenant that's going to be between the WHO and 194 countries. This is a global treaty. This is a global pact. This is not just a bunch of countries in the Middle East. No, this is global, and it's going to be binding for all the countries involved. 9:27, and it reads, and he, which I believe is the WHO, shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, and even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So he, which in this case is the WHO, although I do believe that there is a physical Antichrist entity behind all this, shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And we know 1 week is 7 years. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And this sacrifice, our daily sacrifice, is our job. We sell our time daily, and in return, we are getting paid. So you sell your time for money. You're selling. Now, if you don't take the mark of the BEAST, you are not allowed to sell your time. No it, no job. Okay? And also, you will not be able to buy Revelation 13, verses 16 to 18. So, as I was saying, also in Daniel chapter 11, we read chapter 12, verse 11. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, so we read in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, we read that the sacrifice shall be taken away because he, the Antichrist, will break because I want to be accurate here. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And all right. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. And that comes to 3.5 years. Now, if we count from the time when the abomination of desolation has been set up, let's round it to January 2021. After all, between mid-December 2020 and beginning of January 2021 is just 15 days. So if we have to count 3.5 years, which is 1,290 days from January 2021, that will bring us to July 2024. That's when the WHO pandemic treaty will be in action, and they will be able to declare at will a pandemic. They can declare lockdowns, house arrests, mandating it will become mandatory. As I showed you, there's legislation in the EU being prepared and also in the US. So knowing that the voluntary phase is over, now the imposition of the mark of the BEAST will no longer be voluntary. It's going to be mandatory, and anybody who refuses will be either fined or imprisoned or killed. All right? So, brothers and sisters, the most important thing is that you remain vigilant, that you are in prayer, that you pray unceasingly, that you pray that you are able to stand up in view of all the opposition and persecution that lies ahead. If you haven't come to Jesus Christ, I pray that you call upon him without delay, for time is up. Please like and subscribe and share. And I pray that you all have a blessed day.